We love basketball here on the Sports Cubicle, and we are so lucky to always have the keen eye of the one and only, the marvelous one, Dan Marver, to join me to talk some hoops. I'm Mike Mercado here on the Sports Cubicle. Devin Tingle and Paul Chivari would join us throughout the entire show. It is a busy edition of the Sports Cubicle, and it's going to be a busy time of year for your Chicago Bulls as they get ready to finish off the last 20-ish games of this campaign. And on Thursday, they came back from the All-Star break to beat the Atlanta Hawks 108-112. But on Saturday night at the United Center, the streak came to an end at 6 wins for the Chicago Bulls as they lost to Ja Morant's Memphis Grizzlies 116-110. Ja Morant showed out. So did Trae Young. And of course, so did DeMar. But now comes a really tough streak for your Chicago Bulls. The marvelous one, Dan Marver, and I have been talking about it for a long time. To give you a little idea of what the Bulls have in store for them, the Miami Heat on Monday, the Atlanta Hawks on Thursday, March 3rd, the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks on March 4th. Then you have the Philadelphia 76ers, the new look Philadelphia 76ers, and a trip to Detroit, finally with a matchup against Cleveland at home on March 12th. And the rest of the schedule you should take a look at. But marvelous one. We got a lot to dig into when it comes to basketball, both on the top ranks of the NBA to college basketball, even in the high school ranks. But let's start with the team at the United Center, a team with an MVP candidate. It was a interesting way to come back, and then a tough loss to start the weekend. How are you feeling after 2 games for the Chicago Bulls post All-Star break?
I'm feeling pretty good still, although I am a little worried about them playing the teams ahead of them in the standings. They're 0-7 against the 4 teams ahead of them, and 0-10 if the 76ers factor into the equation. And speaking of MVP candidates, Ja Morant is one, 46 points he scored last night. And they, the Bulls dug a 17-point hole, and they couldn't come back all the way. But Mr. DeRozan did his best with 31 points. But of course, it ended his streak of 8 consecutive games with 35 points while shooting 50% or better. But I'll take 31. I mean, that's still darn good. So, I mean, and I was happy, by the way, to see him get Thompson. That was exactly what I was talking about. He may not, we don't need a lot of points. We just need another big body in there. And he put in, 16 minutes yesterday, 5 points, got some boards and whatnot. And that's what they really need. When they get Caruso and Ball back, for the playoffs, I would assume, if not sooner, because Caruso is going to be sooner. I think they could be a force. The funny thing is, the best teams in the West, I think they might be, if they ever got that far, like Golden State or Phoenix, their style of play might be more conducive to beating them, because Phoenix and Golden State and Memphis are 1, 2, 3 in the West. But I just am worried. Like I say, the teams ahead of them in the standings, they haven't done too well against. The ones in the West particularly. But I think that they're in good shape. I mean, some of those games, like Cleveland and Detroit. I mean, there's some games there that they should be able to win, even though they have a tough stretch coming up. And then I'm also looking at that tough West Coast road trip after all the games you mentioned, Sacramento, Utah, and Phoenix in the middle of March. So, I think that this stretch here with Miami, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Detroit, and Cleveland that you mentioned is a stretch that will be very telling, because they do have to play, on the road 3 of those 5 games. And then they have that tough road trip to the West Coast. But I'm anxious to see Friday night against Milwaukee. That should be very interesting.
It's going to be interesting because, again, that is the champ, right? To be the man, you have to beat the man. But this is a very fun Eastern Conference. And I think that's why, we could look at the Western Conference and we could think about the potential of Memphis, Golden State, a lot of these teams like Utah, Phoenix, where there's a potential finals matchup. But then you mentioned it. I mean, these are the teams you're going to have to play, right? If you're a 2 seed, a 3 seed, you're going to play a tough team. You're going to play a team like Boston or Brooklyn. And I think this is a telling moment for the Chicago Bulls. And Marver, this is why I love talking hoops with you, because we've been talking about Memphis for a long time. They're a tough, gritty team. They're the Chicago Bulls of the Western Conference, except they have a huge superstar. As much as we love DeMar, Ja Morant is going to be a superstar in the NBA for the next 12 to 15 years if he is able to stay healthy. So let me ask you this then, Marvelous. We know this team is going to make the playoffs. I think they've pretty much put themselves in position where they're not going to have to play in the play-in tournaments. So whatever they end up in the seeding, that's where they're going to end up. Let's talk about lineups for a little bit, because there is a chance that they're going to be complete by the time we get to the end of March, beginning of April. who do you think is going to be left out, or who do you think I should say is going to have to take this biggest step back? We just saw recently that Io did struggle. Anybody's going to struggle against John Morant, but he did struggle. So we do know that Billy Donovan is going to take some minutes back. He's going to have to. This is the longest point the rookie's ever gone through, right? No rookie has played as many games as rookies do when they get to this point when they're in college. It just doesn't happen. So where are you at right now with a Tristan Thompson coming into this lineup, with a Nikola Vucevic, with you getting Pat Williams back, Caruso back, Lonzo Ball back? Does a DJJ get sent back, a Javonte Green? Where do you think, if you're starting to think about this rotation in the lineup, how are you managing it? How do you think Billy Donovan is going to manage this lineup come playoff time?
Well, yesterday, they had 8 players that played at least 10 minutes. And I think that cutback will be White, played 35. Green played 28. So there's a couple there that where minutes might be reduced due to Caruso and Ball when they come back. But I'd assume, though, I think these will still be a factor, although he had 0 points last night, so that's a little concerning. So obviously, but all in all, the guard position's the one that's going to be affected. I don't think there's too much up front because, I mean, they're going to still use Thompson, and obviously they're going to use DeRozan, the minutes they have. DeRozan at 41 and Levine at 38, so maybe a small cutback there. But all in all, I think the biggest cutback will be guys like Green and White, Jones, people like that when the guards come back.
Does Patrick Williams go right into the starting lineup if he is healthy and deemed ready to go come, let's say it's in 2 weeks from now, from this recording, this session of the Sports Cubicle with Dan Marver, Devin Tingle, Paul Chivari, myself, Mike Mercado here on WCPT, taking a look at your Chicago Bulls. Patrick Williams comes back. He's fully healthy. We have about, let's say, 4 games left in the season. Is he right in the starting lineup heading into the playoffs?
I think perhaps they want to work him in, depending upon the chemistry at that point. I mean, they don't want to, if they're doing well, they obviously don't want to disrupt that chemistry. So it would depend upon that. And I think that, I don't think he's going to go right into the starting lineup personally, but I think he could be worked into it late in the season. Depending upon their standings and whatnot, they might want to just keep what they've got and work him in off the bench.
I think finally for me, as we kind of take a look at the last few days since the All-Star break, Bulls 1-1 as of this recording since the All-Star break. Tough matchups. Atlanta, a team they might meet in the playoffs. It seems like they can handle that type of team, especially if you're playing defense like that against Trae Young. Memphis, a tough team for anybody. We talk about teams not wanting to play the Bulls if they're healthy in the Eastern Conference. Nobody wants to play the Memphis Grizzlies if they're healthy in the Western Conference. For me, I think it's going to come down to this. The Bulls need to assist. They need somebody who's going to facilitate the ball more, and it's going to be very interesting to see if they're able to get everybody healthy and do that. I also think it's going to be, as much as it's nice to see Tristan Thompson, he's going to have to get acclimated into this offense, into this team. He's only been here for a few days, and he will do that. It's going to be important when you're not letting your guys get bullied and have to carry so much weight throughout the playoffs in the half-court offense and those 50-50 balls, right, Marver? I mean, you've seen so much basketball. You coached it, you scouted it. It's those 50-50 balls, those tip balls that are going to break your back when you're in the middle of a playoff series, and that is something the Bulls are going to need to work on. But I think they're on the right track, and at the very least, we still got some time to see this team get healed up. But marvelous one, we will be here to watch everything that is Chicago Bulls basketball. But speaking of ups and downs, oh my goodness, what in the heck has happened the last few days to some of these top seeds in college basketball?
Wow, it's unbelievable. The seven of the top 10 teams lost yesterday. I mean, Gonzaga, number 1, lost to St. Mary's. Arizona, number 2, lost to Colorado. Auburn at 3 lost to Tennessee. Then Purdue lost to Michigan State at 4. Kansas lost to Baylor. They're 5. And Kentucky at 6 lost to Arkansas. Not to mention number 9, Texas Tech, losing to Texas TCU. So, I mean, on a given day, anybody can beat anybody, right? And that was proven yesterday, as in the first time in history, the top 6 teams in the AP poll all lost. And that's pretty unbelievable, actually.
And we will be talking about the Juwan Howard situation on next edition of the Sports Cubicle with everybody. There was a lot of stuff happening this week, obviously. So we wanted to save that type of story for all of us to be able to get together and talk about. We'll definitely be doing that, especially with tournament time coming for the conferences and Selection Sunday coming. We'll be all over that. And I promise you, the marvelous one, Dan Marver and Paul Chivari, will have a very wonderful local look and national look on this sport. And marvelous one, before we get into something that you brought up about even more close to home thing when it comes to basketball love here in the state of Illinois. I really thought Purdue has a chance to win this whole thing. I think, heck, anybody in the Big Ten of the top tier teams can do this, but it's such a dogfight in the Big Ten. I think that there's a lot of teams that this field is completely open. Before we get into the time of Selection Sunday and seeing who wins the conference tournaments and whatnot, you just had to guess right now. If you had to put some of that, the change that you find in between the cushions of the couch, who do you like right now in college basketball? Who really has your attention as, okay, they could run the whole thing?
I mean, I thought it was going to be Gonzaga until yesterday, maybe, but you never know on a given day. I mean, Duke is still in there. They actually, at number 7, were the highest ranked team that won yesterday. They beat Syracuse by 25. And as our own local John Shire gets ready to take over for Coach K, they could be a factor for sure. But these teams that actually won over the higher seeds, like Baylor at number 10, Tennessee, Arkansas, they're getting hot at the right time. And in the Big Ten, it's funny. The team that was at the kind of in the middle to the bottom, Rutgers, is all of a sudden coming up from nowhere. They beat Illinois. And by the way, Illinois, you'll have the result by the time we're airing, but they're playing the Joanless Michigan today. So Illinois could still be a factor, but I don't see them going, deep. I mean, last year I thought they'd go deeper and they lost to Loyola. So you never know.
It's going to be a fun time. It's one of our favorite times here on the Sports Cubicle as we get ready to show off our brackets. And we will make sure that all of us have a bracket for you to follow along with us here on the Sports Cubicle. It's going to be interesting who wins the first ever Sports Cubicle March Madness bracket between the marvelous one, Dan Marver, Paul Chivari, Devin Tingle, and myself, Mike Mercado. Before we head out of here, though, of course, you can't talk about the NBA or college basketball, whether it's the WNBA or college women's basketball, any one of the variants of this wonderful sport, without talking about high school basketball and the state of Illinois, state of Indiana, Texas, California, Florida, New York. We know how important AAU and high school basketball is. And Marver, you brought this very interesting story that there's some changes going on to the sport, at least the playoffs of the lifeblood, where we get all these amazing talents into these leagues.
Well, a lot of people will be looking next Friday night on for the semifinals of the big boys, the 4A and the big girls, but not anymore. They now have Super Saturday. The girls tournament is going to have all 4 classes with their finals next Saturday, which is the 5th of March. It's still at Redbird Arena. And if anybody's going down to Peoria for the boys finals, you're in the wrong place. It's in Champaign-Urbana now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And as a result, they're going to do this as follows. And this is hard to follow, but I'll do it quickly. On Thursday, they're going to have the 1A and 2A semifinals back to back. And then at night, the 1 and 2A third place games. Okay. Then on Friday, they're going to have the 3A and the 4A during the day semifinals. And at night, the 3A and the 4A third place games. So in other words, you're going to come on Friday night, and if you're a veteran of watching high school hoops, you're going to say, oh boy, we got the semifinals. You get the third place game instead.
Oh, no.
During the day is going to be the whole kabang about 3A and 4A, which is a little weird because it's going to be, people are going to be at work in a lot of cases, but whatever, that's the way it's set up. Then Super Saturday for both the boys and the girls is that Saturday. Girls March 5th, boys March 12th. 1A, 2A, 3A, and 4A finals, one after the other all day long. So they're attempting to make it more interesting with a Super Saturday, but I think they're sacrificing a little bit with the semifinals being during the day with a dopey third place game that's going to be, somebody's going to play with like 3 hours rest, so I don't like that part of it. But the Super Saturday concept is interesting, and it should be fun to be back in Champaign-Urbana after all those years in Peoria. We'll see how it works. And I'm going to be covering the sectional that has the highest ranked teams, by the way. I'm going to be there all week. You got Evanston and Glenbrook South, New Trier, and Rolling Meadows, all of whom are ranked.
Wow.
That's the only sectional where all the teams are ranked. And I'll be there every day and give you reports next week.
Go Mid Suburban League East, except not Rolling Meadows. Go Elk Grove. But it's going to be a fun time. We are so happy that, again, while there's so much going on in the world, that at least in youth sports, there's always that glimmer of hope, because you're going to see some amazing talent. You're going to see some amazing student athletes. And in high school, it is student athletes. These kids put in a lot of work. And so does the fandom of high school sports, because it does take a dedicated person to seek out these games, to go to these games, to cover this sport. And that's why we're so appreciative of the marvelous one, Dan Marver, for all the work that he does for exposing this great sport for these high school students. And here on the Sports Cubicle, whatever little platform we have, we're glad that we have the marvelous one to put a spotlight to that. And marvelous one will give us a very honest, critical opinion about all of this new Super Saturday and how they're going to do this when this all goes down. And he will give us the rundown on how, if it was effective, if this is something they should do moving forward, how it played out for not just the student, not just the student athlete, not just the coaches, but also the fandom and the families watching this entire team, if it's going to be something feasible for the teams and the families and those very important athletes. Marvelous one. It was a fun talking all things hoops. We went all the way to the pros, to the high school level, into those gyms that are going to be filled with kids reaching their potential. Some of them, their highest moments, some of them just the beginning. Some of them will be playing against a DeMar DeRozan in a few years. For the Marvelous one, Dan Marver, for Paul Chivari, for Devin Tingle, I'm Mike Mercado. Make sure you hit us up on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV. How are you feeling about the Chicago Bulls coming back from the All-Star break? Are you excited about March Madness? Will you be enjoying the sectionals in the high school tournament? Let us know on Twitter at Sports Cubicle TV.